The next area we're going to look at is advanced filters. Now, I showed you the filter that will take out traffic from a particular IP address, and that was pretty simple. What that did is just simply says, okay, disregard this traffic. What you can do with an advanced filter is you could modify things like page titles, URL refers, all sorts of really complicated things. For example, if you look over here, this filter on the left-hand side, where it says page title, has this programming language, and page title, and it has this programming language. What this does is it actually strips the year, make, model, and stock number out of the information on the page, and then changes the name of the page to the year, make, and model. If you look over here, you'll see that in this content performance, it'll actually show you which cars are being viewed the most. For example, a used 2001 Honda Accord EX is the most viewed car. It had 85 page views. We use this a lot of times where we have this report emailed on a daily or weekly basis to a used car manager to show them which used car inventory on a site is the most looked at. So finally, one of the last things to look at is cross-domain tracking. And what's important about this is that as people develop applications for the internet, a lot of times it's very hard to make them work together. So what people do is they section together different websites. This is one of our customers' websites, and this top area is their website, but this bottom area is actually pulled in from another website. The problem with this is that as someone goes through this form or views information in this bottom window, Google Analytics stops tracking them, and that throws off your analytics. So for example, if you have your inventory framed in like this, Google Analytics doesn't track anybody going through your inventory. Now what you can do is Google Analytics also has cross-domain tracking, where you can essentially pass the customer from one website to the next and maintain the tracking of that customer. And it's important as we start building bigger and bigger applications, online service reservations, inventory that's iframed in, or other types of applications that are framed in, that we track that. For example, this customer, we're working on that right now. We'd love to know how many people come to a site and make an online service reservation, and with this cross-domain tracking, we can do that. So that's where the seminar is going to come to an end, and there are a couple questions. So if you guys want to type them in now, that'd be great. I'll take an answer for them. I got a question here that if I use eCarList for my website, do I contact them to plant the Google Analytics code on the site? Yes. More than likely, what you do is you contact your web provider to put the code on your site. What you're going to need to do is go to Google Analytics, open an account, and in the process of opening the account, Google Analytics will give you the code, and you pretty much simply email that to your web provider and ask them to install it on every page. It might be important that you get someone involved. We've heard a statistic, and to be honest, I think it's low, that 90% of Google Analytics installations are flawed. The code needs to be installed properly. It needs to be installed properly on every page, and needs to be modified based on the web provider's programming. So, yeah, all you need to do is get the code when you sign up for an account, email it to them, and they'll put it on your site. The next question is, if more people are using the web to gather info, but lead submission is down, what does that mean? Simply, it means that the way people shop the car buying process is not to send an email. What it means is that people go to a site, they research information, and then they go visit the dealership, drive a car, and complete the process at the store. And that's just the natural order of how people do it. Why more people are using the internet is because the internet is just becoming more and more a part of people's everyday lives. People are treating it like a phone book right now, and I'd say 90% of our customers no longer advertise in the yellow pages. And the fact of the matter is, when people want to know your phone number, they simply go to Google or Yahoo, and they type in they type in your store name and call you up. So the fact of the matter is that more people are going to your site, and not many more are submitting leads. So that's important to make sure that you understand that. Another question says, so an iframe is not tracked. No, an iframe is not tracked through Google Analytics. An iframe is realistically the last way that you want to include information into your site. You would use an iframe if you can't get two websites to communicate to one another, and really you only do it if you have to. So it's not tracked, but you can track it if you do some custom programming. To be quite honest, anyone that could, you'd probably need a Google Analytics qualified person to manage that installation, because it can be quite complicated. So yeah, iframes, if you have your iframe, anything iframed into your site, it shouldn't be tracked unless you make very specific programming changes. Another question is, can multiple code sets be put on a website and tracked by different accounts? And that's absolutely true. As a matter of fact, some of our clients do that put multiple codes on their own site. So you could put two codes on a site and have two different accounts track the exact same site, and should present no problems. One of the ways that customers do this is, let's say you're a dealership and you have 6 different dealerships and 6 different sites. Well, you put an individual Google Analytic code on every one of your sites, and you put a second code that's the same. So when you go into Google Analytics, each site will have its individual analytic account, and then you'll have one analytic account, which we call a roll-up account, which will track all of the sites collectively. So yeah, you can put multiples on. To be honest, I haven't really dug into whether you go 3 or 4 or how you program it, but 2 certainly is fine. Another question, does dealer.com automatically use Google Analytics to provide their dealers with this information? No, they don't. They do have some custom programming on their site where you can go into the control center and enter your Google Analytics code, and that will report your Google Analytics activity back to your analytics account. They have installed, we're not 100% on how they install the Google Analytics code for a couple of reasons. One, they install their own Google Analytics code on every site, and they have a giant roll-up account that tracks every site that they manage. So they don't install the code exactly to Google specifications, and sometimes when they modify that code, it doesn't report properly. And you kind of have to, again, be a little bit of someone who understands Google Analytics to figure that out. But yeah, dealer.com doesn't automatically utilize Google. You have to obtain a code and enter it into the control center, and it will track that. Like I said, we think they're doing a pretty sufficient job at putting the codes on and tracking them, and when there is an error, they do a great job at fixing it pretty quickly. So. At this point, I don't see any other questions coming up, so if you have a question, now would be the time to answer it. Otherwise, we're going to close out the webinar. What we will do is take this webinar and take the recording of it and post it on our site, so you can pass it around and look at it for later use. But I don't see any more questions coming in, so at this point, we're going to close the webinar. The next webinar is, if you go to our site, under the news section, you'll see what the next webinar is. That is going to be on search engine marketing. It'll be a month from now, and I think it's going to be around about the 11th, 12th, or 13th. But if you go to our site, go under the news section, you'll see the next webinar, which will be a month from now. It'll be on search engine marketing, similar content, and you can sign up right there. So at this point, appreciate everybody coming, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact us and go to our site. Thanks a lot.